Hey everyone, welcome to Broadband Deployment News. The state of Georgia is going to be awarding about $234 million to 12 internet service providers in the state to help provide broadband. Be right back with some of the details. Thanks for joining me, Rick Usey, here with Broadband Deployment News. So I live in Georgia, and so this caught my eye, and I'm always interested in what's happening with funds that are being distributed. And this money is coming through the Capital Projects Fund. And this was actually announced back around the 1st of December. When the I guess it was the Commerce, not the Commerce Department. Was it the Commerce Department? I can't remember who does this, but this is through ARPA, and this is particularly the Capital Projects Fund of ARPA. And it was announced that several states were getting a good amount of money, and Georgia was announced that they were getting $250 million. So they have now told us, Georgia's told us how $234 million of that's going to be spent. So I was going to run through this and give you a few details. So Governor Brian Kemp today announced over $234 million in 29 preliminary grant awards for broadband internet expansion through the Capital Projects Fund grant program. This is a fund program that's part of ARPA, or the American Rescue Plan Act. There's the Capital Fund grant program. Then there's there was the local fiscal recovery program. A lot of money from ARPA has been used from that for broadband as well. These awards will improve connectivity for communities, households, businesses, and anchor institutions in 28 Georgia counties. And when combined with significant capital matches from the awardees, almost $455 million will be invested to serve over 76,000 locations and communities, some of the greatest need for high-speed internet access. You can see here, August 12th, Governor Kemp announced the creation of the Capital Projects Fund grant program that would be utilizing, again, funds from ARPA. The Governor's Office of Planning and Budget and Georgia Technology Authority worked together to identify the most unserved and underserved counties in the state and establish a competitive grant program. I'm assuming they're using those definitions kind of being in sync with what we have from the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, which would be unserved being anything less than 25 by 3, and underserved being something less than 100 by 20, but over 25 by 3. These awards also follow the historic $408 million in preliminary grant funds that the state announced in February of last year. Together, these programs equal nearly $650 million in grant funds that will work hand in hand with hundreds of millions of additional matching funds. These investments and the projects associated with these two grant programs aim to serve roughly 200,000 of the remaining 455,000 unserved locations in the state. So as I've said before, we've got a lot of money that we're waiting on through the BEAD program, but as you can see, the state of Georgia, for example, and other states are not waiting on that. I mean, obviously they're getting prepared for the historic amount of money there, but we're looking at a ton of money here that is coming out that's just about cutting in half between these two grants or grant awards, cutting in half the amount of unserved locations in the state. So by the time we get to the point where, which will be later this, let's say June of this year, all of these locations will be off the map, and that will just make that money that Georgia is going to get go even further. So that's why I've said that I really don't think, if states are doing the right thing, they should have enough money to get all of their citizens covered with broadband. Georgia is one state that's projected to get one of the higher amounts from BEAD because of the number of unserved locations, and yet here they are taking care of a lot of those. In fact, it was projected that they would get $1.9 billion from BEAD. Every state's supposed to get a minimum of $100 million, and I saw estimates that were fairly well done that say they should get about $1.9 billion, and then approximately, let's say, a $1.1 billion match will bring them up to like $3 billion that they'll be able to use to complete all of the broadband deployments that they need in the state. The 29 awardees announced today include 12 different internet service providers. We'll take a look at those here in a minute. Comprised of EMCs, large telecom companies, and local Georgia-based companies. The state will open a second round of the Capital Projects Fund grant program for the 5 eligible counties that did not receive an award this spring. That would be Calhoun, Eccles, Johnson, Miller, and Webster. So that may be the remaining, like I said, this was $234 million, and then I think originally it was announced like 250 approximately, almost $250 million that they were supposed to get. That announcement from December from the federal government. So then there's a list of the locations. Where is it? Here it is, broadband awards. So that's what that looks like. And I took that data. I'll go through this in a minute, but well, actually, I'll look at it here. It's a little bit bigger on the screen. So you can see the counties, and you can see the who it is that's going to be getting the money. And there are some large operators on here. And I know some people have a problem with that. They're like, well, why are these big MSOs, these huge corporations getting this money? Well, for one reason, they know how to deploy broadband, and they've got economies of scale to be able to do it in such a way that maybe sometimes smaller companies don't. And that is an issue for a lot of people, because we want small companies to succeed as well. But I mean, they have an advantage going in. In a lot of cases, they have infrastructure nearby that they can leverage. So yeah, it's just kind of the way it works. I know a lot of people don't like to see that, but you've got here, you see Spectrum Southeast. So we got Spectrum in there. Comcast Cable's got quite a few. Windstream, that's a regional provider that's heavily here in Georgia. And they've been doing a lot of public-private partnerships with companies as well, with electric membership co-ops, for example. Satilla Rural Electric Membership, that's a smaller EMC. Mediacom, Comcast again, Grady Electric Membership. Comcast, Spectrum again, Comcast, Spectrum. Mitchell Electric Membership Corporation, Spectrum Southeast. We got Windstream again, and Mediacom again. Then we've got Cox. It's interesting because they're based here in Georgia, but they're not heavily. They don't have a lot of service here in Georgia, but they're based here in the state of Georgia. Glenwood Telephone Company. That's a local Georgia telephone company. Irwin EMC, Middle Georgia EMC, Oconee EMC, and Mitchell EMC. And you can see the amounts here. I took that. I'm always curious as to how much that is per location. So I did go ahead and take that information and put it in a spreadsheet. So you can see, the amounts vary from, 1,800, 2,200, 2,700, 3,000. That's kind of like your mid-range, 5,000, 7,000. You got up to 10,000 in a couple of these, like here, Glasscock County. I'm going to take a look at that in a minute. And you've got another 10,000 here, Windstream, Randolph County. So again, the amounts vary, but in general, again, the average is kind of 3,000. That's what I see when I look at these awards, whether it's something from RDOF or something else where they're getting a certain amount of money per location. A lot of times it's in that range, 3,000, 4,000. It's going to vary depending on how rural the area is and how expensive it's going to be. So I was curious about Glasscock, so I pulled that up. This is Glasscock County here in Georgia. You can see it's fairly rural. If I put let me go ahead and put on the satellite. If I put on the satellite and zoom in, you'll see, you'll see a lot of it's not a lot of, there's a few little towns here. You got Gibson here. Zoom in on that. And you've got, these areas are going to be covered by some providers. And then as we get further out, it's going to be harder to get those areas covered, because you've got a lot of rural areas. You've got places where you've got, these roads here where you've got only a few houses here and there, so you got long runs probably, and it's not as economical for an internet service provider. They can go in some of these small towns, but then a lot of these areas, in these counties that are between the towns, a lot of times don't get covered. So again, Blaylock, fairly small county. So I was curious, to see what Comcast was doing here, because this is like, why are they getting Blaylock? So I looked at some other areas on the map, including related to what they're getting here. So they actually already provide service. Let's see, where's Blaylock? It's not Blaylock, Glasscock, excuse me, here. So they already actually provide service in Warren. So this is where, this area here is where Augusta is. So that's a big town in Georgia, big city in Georgia, Augusta. So they're already providing service there. If I remember, let me go back to my county map here. So let's see what I got. So I got, they're not providing service. Actually, they are. They're providing service they're providing service in Thompson. They're not providing service here, but they're providing service. This is Augusta over here. So they're obviously covering this area. They're covering this town of Thompson. They are covering, I think if I remember, they're covering down here in Louisville, Georgia. So they're kind of extending, they've got infrastructure in this area, and they're kind of extending that out to be able to cover this area. Spectrum is actually down in this area, and Spectrum, they won, I believe they won Jefferson. Yeah, so Spectrum actually won some money here, if I remember when I was looking at it. Let's see. Spectrum, yeah, Jefferson, Spectrum Southeast. So they won that county. Whoops, can't see it from here. So again, we've got Glasscock here. So Spectrum's got this area, and again, Xfinity Comcast already providing service in this area, and they are extending into this area as well as, I think, what was it, Hancock? Comcast, sorry, bear with me here. Bartow, Burke, Carroll, Floyd, Glasscock, Gordon, Jackson County, and that's it. So let's see. So I think it was Jackson. No, where was it? Oh, Hancock. But that was one. Yeah. So this is another one. So this is another area that they won. So they won Glasscock and they won Hancock. Again, they're already over here. So this is giving them a chance to kind of extend their, especially in this area right here, extend this part of their plant. That makes some sense. And again, looking at the county, you can see why that would be one that would be very, very expensive. So again, it's a nice mix of providers here. It looks like Georgia is again, they're not ignoring the large providers that are that can provide the service that seem to be, in the area, but they also know that there are some areas that they're going to need to look at some others. So they've got several EMCs in here. Again, Glenwood Telephone. So I find this interesting that again, there's lots of money that's still being used and getting ready to be used prior to anything that's coming out on the BEAD program. So we will continue to see the number of unserved locations shrink. And all of these locations that we're seeing here, since this money has now been kind of allocated by the federal government to Georgia, and Georgia is now allocating it to these particular unserved areas, and some says underserved. So it's kind of a combination of the two. Then these areas will not be on the FCC broadband map as unserved, or they should not be. So the FCC will be taking that into account when they put out the new FCC broadband map. So anything that you're looking at today on the Georgia brand broadband map and you're seeing unserved, a lot of these areas are now going to be off that. So they're saying 70,000 here, and that's quite a chunk that's coming off of the map. So it'd be interesting to see how many are left when we get to the point where the broadband map comes out. And all of this will determine how much of the money that Georgia and other states will get based on the number of unserved locations that they have compared to those throughout the country. So thanks for joining me. If this was interesting or helpful, if you would give me a like on the video and subscribe if you're not subscribed, click the little bell to be notified. And anytime that I'm online, either loading a video or going live, you will get a notification on your phone or something on your browser that you can then check that out or ignore it if you'd like. So it's whether or not it's interesting to you. But thanks again for joining me anytime that you do. I appreciate it. And I will see you next time for Broadband Deployment News. Take care.